and what impact will it have on our future? This session explores how generative AI is driving innovation in the industry, and we have some incredible speakers to guide us through this transformation. So I'm going to welcome our panellists on stage. Now, I have heard that Harpreet is unable to join us today, so we've just got these lovely 4 panellists joining us. So if you guys want to come up on stage, that's all right. And I'm going to get Catherine to kind of introduce the panel today. Whether they want to introduce themselves, that's totally up to them. But I will hand it over to Catherine. So a big round of applause quickly before they start.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'm Catherine Boychuk. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at EY. I am really looking forward to this conversation today. The last couple of weeks, I've been at Gartner Symposium, we've seen World Tour with Salesforce announced yesterday, and we've also seen the updates from Workday. Agentic AI is in. It is on avant-garde to say agentic in your AI strategy. You heard it here, probably 57th, because we're at the end of the day of day 1. But I did want to call out that there seems to be a real vacuum when it comes to implemented use cases that have achieved outcomes. That's the goal of the conversation today. But before we jump in, I'd love you to each introduce yourself. Just give us how to get in touch, your kind of exposure as well, because we kind of rush that at the end. And I think that given you all have launched AI use cases at scale successfully with some of Australia's well-known brands like NAB and Hester, it would be great to give context around who you are and why you're here on this stage.
Awesome. I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of Redactive. Redactive helps enterprises move fast with generative AI safely. And we do that by broadly being able to understand permissions and data inside of an organization and connect that up to models and make sure those models respect those permissions. Easiest way to get in contact with me is on LinkedIn or via our contact page on our website, which has freshly been re-updated just for this event, everyone, so go and check it out. But thanks very much. I'll throw over to Amanda.
Thank you. I'm Amanda Benny. I'm the General Manager of Technology at Hester. I've been there just over 12 months and joined a really exciting journey there on the GenAI train, and have been working closely with Redactive on that.
Cool. So I'm Mark from Ingenious AI, also one of the co-founders. We've been doing this for 7 years, so I was doing AI before it was cool. So everyone jumped on the bandwagon. But basically, our sort of approach has been to try and make it accessible to those that actually are trying to solve a problem with it. One of the things about AI at the moment is it's this magic. It's pixie dust. The business can just sprinkle it over it and solves all their problems, is the promise. It doesn't quite work out like that. So we try to bring a little bit of that pixie dust into reality. Just hit us up on LinkedIn or on our website, ingenious.ai.
Thanks, Mark. Amanda, I might start with you. How does Hester think about generative AI in the context of what are your strategic priorities around people and customer? And just share a little bit about your journey over the last 12 months with generative AI.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I joined at the right time of that journey. I think Hester's been lucky enough to have that great foundational base around cloud, data, and I guess knowing where we want to go, and that right capability at the right time. And I think it is the perfect prism, really. It's not just about technical skill, but that enthusiasm and want to try something new, which I think has been fantastic. For us, the customer is our member. And so we've been speaking, even probably separate from GenAI, we've been speaking about that connected experience and what that means for our member. GenAI just supports that. It just opens those opportunities when we talk around personalised experience, getting better outcomes. For our member base, 80% women, low income earners, everything is about our member and how we can serve them better. And I just think GenAI has given us that great opportunity to do that. So strategically, we've written literally the words AI first into our next tech strategy. What that means, that's the big part of it, but it is very product driven for us. So, making sure that we do think about that as we build out our products, but also business process driven as well. How do we get the benefit from that trialling and investment in building out that GenAI capability?
That's such a great point. EY also subscribes to the AI everywhere philosophy. However, it's fun to say that in a pack. It's very hard to convince 400,000 people that they need to be reskilled on AI. Can you share a little bit about that conversation? Because I think that that's one of Australia's greatest challenges, is we need 200,000 more AI skilled workers in a very, 36 months. I don't know about you all, but our university system is not going to generate them, so there's a massive upskilling or reskilling required of our nation. So how did you approach that conversation with the HESTA team more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think just luckily the journey is all fitting. So we've, alongside, what we've been doing, have a future of work strategy as well that centres a lot on capability. So again, we're talking about not just tech capability, it is capability throughout the entire organisation. So as we've introduced our GenAI product, internally known as HESTA AI, we put HESTA at the front of everything, we've very much thought about that capability in terms of adoption. So, this isn't just cutting over a new finance system and saying, okay, you used this system one day and now you'll use this. It is about embedding this capability and use with everything that you do. So whether you think about it strategically, whether you think about it operationally, whether you think about it as a task, we know that we've got to build out that capability. So we've taken people on a journey, really, and whilst we go, softly and safely, we've thought about how do we introduce AI as just a general concept to people who, may be fearful that they'll lose their job as we introduce this more, or are just fearful of that change in technology, full stop. And so we've thought about that capability journey from a perspective of, one, that here's what you can do to enhance your job and add more value through the use of it. Capability from the perspective of simple use, functionality use, prompt engineering, understanding what that even means. And then we know we've got more advanced people who are ready to learn the next bit of information around the actual models and what they mean and the difference in the models that are available.
I love that, softly and safely. There must have been a lot of lessons learned along the way, softly and safely.
So many lessons. So many battle scars.
Can we share, because I am conscious that a lot of the use cases that are shared with the market are all polished, but I have found on my journey of scaling AI to 400,000 people in the past 12 months and 11,000 locally here in Australia, one of my lessons learned was people don't know that, like Copilot and ChatGPT and they don't know that they're different things. They all think it's all the same thing, like it's one thing. And so people were quite shocked that they were required to do safe and responsible use of every single tool that they used, and it required multiple training experiences. What are some of those lessons that you've learned in your partnership with HESTA that are just, really wise takeaways in terms of, softly and safely?
I think for us, one of the key things we took away from working with HESTA was how important it was to just have a very clear plan about and an opinion about what it meant for something to be responsible. So the HESTA team were extremely opinionated on, this is our compliance obligations, this is how we would like this thing to work, this is how we look at the concept of kind of safe and responsible within their respective worldview. And we were able to kind of start to structure, this is our initial use case, this is the initial thing we want to give a go. And so HESTA AI was was really quite an easy process. I mean, perhaps I shouldn't speak too widely to the whole organisation. Maybe it was much more painful for others. But for the Redactive team, we found it very easy to work with Hester. And we found that because they had a plan, they had an opinion, and they understood, I think, what it meant for that safely concept to exist inside of their solution architecture, we were able to fit in very well. And I think our opinion on what it meant for something to be safe and responsible mapped really well to how Hester was thinking about it. So for us, one of the big things was, we want to have people's permissions respected. We want people to be represented as an individual user, and we want those permissions to be live. We don't want to duplicate information. We don't want to train models on their information. Like, we had all of these perspectives, and they all mapped really well to Hester, and they all mapped really well to other partners we utilise in the solution architecture as well, like AWS, for example. So these are the types of things that we started to notice where, this is much, much easier because our respective worldviews on what it meant for something to be responsible and safe were really clearly mapped out, and we were all aligned on from day one.
Thanks, Alexander. Mark, we've all been a fan of AI, the boring AI, not the fancy cool new one. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of fraud detection. I'm a fan of the Falcon. I'm a fan of anything that stops my card from getting hacked, to be honest with you. But we know that banking has had the unsexy version of AI at scale for almost a decade now. I'd love for you to bring some colour on how your relationship with NAB has evolved and what are now the strategic kind of challenges and opportunities that you guys are throwing around together.
Yeah, so we started with NAB in 2020, in the middle of COVID. I don't recommend going live with a big bank as a startup in the middle of COVID. That is hard. But the initial sort of aim for them was really just customer service. At the start was like, cool, let's just try and service our customers better in their own way. But that definitely evolved along the journey. Thankfully, the experience was like, we don't want to talk to customers at the start, to, hey, let's, what's the current mantra? Digital first, human when it matters, which I think is sort of a nice approach to take. But now they're really looking at, especially with the generative AI, like it can fill so many gaps quite quickly and easily. It's like this putty filler you can just slap around on all these little bits and pieces with the business. So a quick example of what we've done with them recently. Customers tell a story when they come in and talk to the bank. They're like, I was doing this and this happened and I got drunk at the pub and I think I left my wallet there, but I don't know. Can I pause my card? So the previous generation of the AI sucked at understanding that. Like, it just done too many words. It just wouldn't even get close to matching it all the time. But with the generative AI, you can kind of just go, all right, cool, can you summarise that into the core problem the customer has, which then plays into the strengths of the traditional AI. So you're sort of blending the AIs into this, taking the strengths of both and sort of mapping them together. So it's not so much that you rip out the old and just shove in generative AI. It's looking at how does that blend and how does they complement each other so that you can take something like, the big sexy fraud stuff and be like, cool, we've got all these models and I can get patterns out and whatnot, but I need a level of additional intelligence to interpret what is going on here. And it's that blending of the worlds that starts to get a better outcome, and it gets really sexy of being able to actually ask questions of that data, and that's when it starts to get really cool. But I'll touch on that in a second.
One of the strategic themes that's going to be hot in 2025 is this concept of a guardian layer and establishing a guardian. Look at all the banking people go, yep. And so can we, for the audience, I'd love to get each of your perspective around, particularly because banking is a sector that has matured like a very stable architecture for a long period of time around AI, and you've had both structured and unstructured data able to access those architectures. Can you share your point of view around the guardian layer and it potentially becoming a guardian ecosystem? And what are some of the kind of things that you think, advice for this audience in terms of watching out for the guardian layer with AI, as opposed to, I think people focus on the cyber and the data and the services and the orchestration and think that trust is this thing that you get embedded in all of the solutions. But I know that that's like far from the truth. So if you could each share a point of view around what have you learned around the kind of maturing around that trust layer to becoming a guardian layer, and what are some of the watch outs and lessons learned that you would provide?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. All right. Yeah, that one's a hard one. There's plenty of like approaches that they've taken, but at the moment, it's sort of stopgap. Like there's still a ton of risk attached to it, which I think is why there's not a lot of organisations sort of putting this stuff directly to customers. It's sort of internal use cases where there is definitely a human in the loop, and not just any human, someone who is an expert in that sort of field or area that they're in. So it's really just about that assistance to try and optimise what that person is doing, and really take the drudgery probably out of their job at the end of the day. Because the guardrails that are around these things really aren't that good. There's plenty of examples on the web at the moment of people poking in the right way to get through those guardrails and to make the AI do dumb stuff at the end of the day. And I think it's probably going to be, to be honest, my view is it's going to be a generation of this technology before those controls are actually properly in place and are trustworthy. I think at the moment it's too risky to sort of put that through from a direct customer side of things. Like my silly analogy sort of internally is, because everyone's like, oh, but what about if internally they start prompt engineering and whatnot? It's like, sure, but I can walk over to the photocopier and photocopy my ass, and it's still the same thing. I can still use tools inappropriately in the organisation. Just discipline like it would if I photocopied my ass, right? That's the way that it works internally. So don't picture my ass, please. But you know what I mean, right? At the end of the day, it's really just about putting the simple controls that are in place today, existing within the organisation, and don't worry about the tech too much. Try to enable them and just teach them how to get the most out of it at the end of the day. And I think that's the current approach that most organisations are taking.
Alex, your advice on the Trump/Guardian spectrum?
It's so funny, like listening to all of the new names that people come up with for like differing layers of the solution stack.
I'm a consultant, I
quite like Guardian layer. We had Sentinel once in marketing material that got thrown in the bin.
That's so unhuman.
Yeah, it's really funny. I think when we first started the business, one of my co-founders pulled me aside and was like, "You can't say agentic in meetings. People think we're crazy. Like, they'll actually think that we're psychopaths." And the first thing you get on stage is like, agentic guardian layer. And I'm like, whoa, okay. The nomenclature has progressed. What I would say is the way that we've always thought about guardian layers is through the lens of probabilistic and deterministic. Models are, broadly speaking, all probabilistic. They're going to kind of shoot out information depending on, the set of inputs and the basis of those probabilities. What Redactive does is that we're a deterministic layer on top of that, and we don't pass information into those models unless that person has permission in the data source, the source of truth. That was always our opinion on this is the safest, this is the most secure way for people to put their enterprise data into a respective generative AI model. And as such, that was how we looked at this layer, this concept of the guardian layer. I think as time has progressed, we see how there's more and more layers that have been added at other parts of the solution architecture. I'm sure Amanda will probably talk about what they've done at Hester. There's other stuff there as well. And even like we're starting to look at novel functionality that we can offer to our customers to improve that guardian layer. Right now we rely on those end data source permissions. Well, can we provide feedback on those? And again, that's where we're starting to see ourselves go as an organisation, where we can start to provide even more context to say not only, hey, we're going to respect the end source of truth, we're going to be that deterministic layer, but now we're also going to start advising the business using the data that we have access to say, hey, we think that this is how your permissions should be structured. So broadly speaking, that's kind of how we look at the guardian layer. Amanda, you want to maybe talk about the other constituent parts?
Yeah, I mean, for us, that was a massive problem to solve, was that trust in permissions in your data. I think it's been well spoken about in terms of the issues that Copilot, for example, will surface in terms of the permissions you have over your data. And GenAI will just amplify that broadly across your data set. So for us, being able to put it out to the business to say, you know, we can trust this because we've covered that security part was really important, albeit that we do know it's going to raise those issues around native security issues. The guardrails piece is a big one. I think there's the technical guardrails that you can put in place. I think what we're honestly seeing is that there's nothing consistent in that at the moment. So whether you're using Anthropic or OpenAI, the guardrails will give you different responses. So, you know, at some point, you know, that guardrails as a service will hopefully become more than just a reactionary thing, and it's something that you can trust and rely on. But to Mark's point, it is about that responsibility component, and I think that's a really big thing when you're implementing this. It's around that responsible use of AI really embedded in your culture, because I think people think that when we give a tool like this a task to do, that I can go, well, that's it then. Hest AI told me this, and away you go. I can, you know, not hold my current responsibilities, but they don't change. And I think that's a really important thing to embed. If you use this in a business process, to be really clear that the responsibilities that you have around decision making and so on do not change. We're not delegating that to a machine. And for us, supporting that with some overarching principles and rules around the use of AI was a big thing for us when we implemented it.
And as we look forward, we've got a packed audience here today, and we're heading into day 2, where I'm sure there'll be a lot more debate around scaling AI and use cases. We know that 91% of use cases with AI at scale in Australia are productivity in nature. And there is a sweet spot for those that have scaled AI that has the best of human skill augmented with what we call an AI skill or workload. And I definitely am seeing people only implement the tech and replace human. And on the flip side, I'm seeing other workloads where people cannot reimagine it being orchestrated using AI. Such is their perception around the ability of AI and how far off it is, when it's actually incredibly close to a human level of decision making. So what's your advice? In a world where we have an opportunity to reimagine how we create value, and we're in the financial services sector, it feels like there is a natural sweet spot between human centric skill and agentic skill, and I think there's going to be a huge debate around workloads and how much is human versus agentic. We believe that the philosophy should be that it's always human augmented, as opposed, particularly when you're serving humans, especially when it comes to money. Over 50% of Australians use AI every day, but when surveyed, more than 50% said nearly 72% said stay away from my money if you're going to be using AI. We are very opinionated as a country when it comes, so it shows that even everyday Australians don't even connect fraud protection services that I think we all love to being an AI level of service. So what is your advice for this audience? Because there's going to be a lot of tech sold. They're going to be sold a dream that AI can help with huge cost out and huge productivity and a lot of savings and a lot of automation. But there is a sweet spot. I think, Amanda, you said it quite perfectly, the best of human plus orchestration is kind of the sweet spot. But if we could get your point of view for this room around, given that you're at scale and you're starting to leverage Hester AI, and also at NAB, it'd be great to get your sweet spot.
I'll fill in for Happy. Cool, yeah, I'll jump in first. Yeah, look, my take on that is trust. Is really what it comes down to. So while I'd love for it to hallucinate a couple of zeros on my bank account, I don't think they're going to be happy about doing that. But when you do that human augmentation, the only way they can trust is to see the raw data sort of behind it at the end of the day. So it's all good and well for it to produce, like, here's what I think you should do. It's like, well, how did you get to that? That's a little bit out there. Wouldn't have thought that, but could be an interesting sort of idea or knowledge set. So giving them the ability to kind of poke behind the scenes and see behind the curtain as to what data it's sort of used to bring that forward. So references, basically, of here's the data I've got to. So then they can have a high level of trust sort of going forward. So even if it starts to generate something that might be a little bit beyond what they would normally expect, they can still get a level of validation behind the scenes that, okay, yeah, I can see why that output has been there. And then they'll start to use it more at the end of the day. Like, as long as it's producing a really good output the vast majority of the time, it won't be every time, but the vast majority of the time, then all of a sudden these tools start to have a fairly significant impact within the business and that efficiency and other bits and pieces, so that they can start to focus on the valuable part of their job instead of just, generating random reports for management up the tree.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's touched on the two key points that I would make. One is explainability. So I think that's still a massive challenge as we use it for more complex tasks. That ability to explain what the model has done needs to be there. And so I think there's still a bit to do there to really get that, and it obviously links back to trust. And the other one is about a focus on value creation. And I think, go back 15 years in a law firm looking at lean processes, and your main focus was really to cut down your workforce. It's not the same discussion now. Like, we don't implement these tools to reduce headcount and get more profit. It is about how we can generate value and have the people do the things where they do add the most value within that process as well.
Thanks. And to take us out, Alexander.
I think I've always thought through this problem through the lens of human-centricness. Like, a responsible solution is a human-centric solution, and a human-centric solution is one that essentially asks, all of the people inside of your organisation, all the stakeholders, what are those jobs you really want to do? What are the things that you're adding value to, as Amanda said? We spoke about fraud. No one ever asks, hey, can I do fraud by hand? No one's asking to go and sign up to the fraud calculation team where they sit down with a calculator and try and figure out whether something looks fraudulent. And I think that's because we have this human-centric approach where we've understood that's not a task humans can do. That's not a task we would even be comfortable doing. And so we've given that to a model. But I think when it comes to these human interactions, when it comes to certain types of decisioning, we want humans in the loop because it makes us feel more comfortable. We drive more value. And I think this concept of human-centricness, I think if you're a leader, that should not be lost on you when you're making decisions pertaining to your generative AI strategy. Because that's the core thing that I think drives the success inside of the organisation to really push forward with a generative AI solution.
Can I just add one more thing to that, and using an example? So I think that trust component is really important in terms of actually trusting our output, and I don't think we're actually there yet. So you have to actually still have that human in the loop. When we were training people and rolling out HEST AI, we asked HEST AI a question in one session and asked the very same question in the next session, and it just started speaking Spanish to us. So for no explainable reason, those things, not the Spanish component, but always in a demo that something's going to go wrong, but the Spanish, that was... And so I don't even think as, putting forward a solution to HESTA that we're ready to even say, humans don't need to be involved in this. We're not ready to actually trust it. We still don't know we're not there to understand the outcomes and the consequences yet to really say you can trust this. The patterns show us that we've been making good decisions and therefore you can. We don't know that.
Just quickly.
I think you're spot on. I'm getting eyes that we're at time.
Oh, are we? Okay.
But what I would say is that in order to shape the future with confidence, you actually need to consciously decide to oversee it and be a guardian of it. Please put your hands together for Mark, Alexander and Amanda.